was exactly in the wake of the thalidomide scandal, and it should have been upmost in people's minds that women needed warning when they were pregnant about the drugs they took. The fact that it came after that should have made it more likely that they would have informed women.
Very good point. And I'll just go on to talk about some further warnings that were issued. I understand that there was a patient information leaflet from the producer Sanofi in 2000 saying, "It is known that women who have epilepsy have a slightly higher risk of having a child with an abnormality than other women. Women who have to take Epilin in the first 3 months of pregnancy to control their epilepsy have about a 1 to 2% chance of having a baby with spina bifida." And then again in 2005 they added, "Some babies born to mothers who took Epilin during pregnancy may develop less quickly than normal and may require additional educational support. And some babies born to mothers who took Epilin during pregnancy may develop less quickly than normal or have autistic disorders." So through the years there were warnings that were coming, and yet still nothing was done to ensure that patients were told. Why did patients have to wait almost 30 years to be warned of risks? Women like the two brave women who've been referred to already by the Right Honourable Member for North Norfolk, tenacious and brave campaigners Janet Williams and Emma Murphy, who I too have had the privilege to meet. They've campaigned for years, they've set up a support group for affected families, and I want to pay tribute to them. And I want to tell you a little bit about their family situations. Janet has two sons, aged 26 and 28, Lee and Philip. Janet took Epilin during pregnancies, both of them, but nothing else. She told me, "I wasn't offered anything else, and no one told me of the risks." Lee at 26 has curvature of the spine, Asperger's, learning difficulties, memory problems, and he can't hold down a job. Philip at 28 has even more problems. He has problems with hearing, vision, speech, language, walking, floppy joints, and is still fully dependent on Janet. Now Emma, a generation later, had her children. Emma has 5 children, aged 8 to 14, Chloe, Lauren, Luke, Erin and Kian. They've all been diagnosed with a number of symptoms. All have problems, varied problems: autism, incontinence, deafness, cerebral palsy, curvature of the spine. All are slow to develop. Emma too took Epilin, the same dose during each pregnancy, and she told me she questioned it, but she was told it was the best drug to control her seizures and that her baby would be fine. She took no other drugs during her pregnancies. No one warned Emma of the risks. But the tragedy is, they are 2 women who tell me they represent over 1,000 in their support group, FACSA, the Fetal Anticonvulsant Association. And together they founded the registered charity INFACT, the Independent Fetal Anticonvulsant Trust, to campaign for better awareness of the risks of taking valproate to prevent further such difficulties occurring in the future, and to challenge government that there is, as I say, a case to answer. I do not believe we would be here today were it not for these 2 women. They really do deserve our considerable...
Yes. Very forgiving way. Would she agree with me that women like Janet and Emma are ideally placed to get compensation should the government agree to a similar system to the French Depakine compensation system of €10 million?
I certainly think that's something which has to be looked at in, as I say, this case which ministers have to answer. Now, I would like to say much more, Mr Deputy Speaker, but time prohibits me. We have heard of some of the terrible statistics which have already been quoted, about 20,000 children who could have been affected since warnings were first known, or risks were first known, 400 children born each year still, of 28,000 women of childbearing age, and these are apparently according to ONS figures, who are still being prescribed the drug, and 68% of women who have it say they are still not properly informed of the risks. So, what do I ask ministers? Could I ask that the Minister would agree that significantly more needs to be done now, urgently, to raise awareness of the risks of taking sodium valproate by pregnant women or women who could become pregnant. Does he agree that whilst ministers themselves may only have come to know about these risks relatively recently, the producer Sanofi, the MHRA and its predecessor, the Committee on Safety of Medical Standards, did and should have done more to address these issues, to have published information, to have improved warnings years ago? Does the Minister accept that the support needed by mothers like Janice and Emma, where they have to care for their children with fetal valproate syndrome, is major, could be lifelong, and that much more needs to be done to look at how that support can be improved and funded? Janice and Emma tell me that the current provision through local authority, health and local council provision is wholly insufficient, and that care plans are needed for the many affected children. Is there any reason why ministers cannot, as I've said at the outset, look at what we in this country can do more to support these families now without further delay, and certainly without awaiting a final decision of the European Commission regarding the link between sodium valproate and birth defects? We are, after all, leaving the EU. Does the Minister have full confidence now in the MHRA to effectively inform and guide healthcare professionals on the use of the prescription of sodium valproate for epilepsy? And does he think that the same could be said for the MHRA's involvement over the years? And finally, will he meet personally with Janet Williams and Emma Murphy and a group of us concerned here in this House about this issue at an early date to respond to their concerns and the call that I have today, that there is, at the very least, on behalf of our government today, a case to answer with regard to this issue?
Paul Flynn.
It was heartbreaking and infuriating to read the news that 68% of the women who are taking valproate today weren't aware of the risks. This is a failure for all of us. We debated this in 2013 in March. We've had EDMs down. There was a whole program on television program chaired by Hugh Edwards, where the victims took part in this. We thought we'd cracked it. We thought we'd advertised this enough so that no one after that, after 2013, could be in the position where they didn't realise the terrible risks of taking valproate in pregnancy were caught. And I'm not making any criticism of anyone on this except the MHRA, and I think we must look to the relationship that we have with the regulatory body. The minister, the previous minister, who did all that he could, and he's got a great honourable record here as a compassionate campaigner in himself for many issues, and it's a shock to all of us that we didn't expect the compensation to come along, but that's something that should be coming along, and it's not any kind of compensation in any serious way, but it is some admission that a terrible mistake has been made, not by the mothers themselves, but by the system. And it's helpful to look back at what happened during thalidomide, and I remember it vividly. There were 2,000 birth defects in the United Kingdom. There were 20 in the United States, and why was that? And the reason was that we went on prescribing Destaval a year after the birth defects were suspected. And the reason was that the drug company were adamant. They tested it. They tested it on animals, pregnant rabbits even. And it was only when they came back and did another test on a particular strain of pregnant rabbit that the birth defects were reproduced. But it shows the limits to animal testing. But when they were, what the real difference was, that the regulatory body in the United States wouldn't accept thalidomide in that form, and it was used in a very small number of cases, so 20 compared to 2,000. We've had the effect of a drug called Vioxx, which was for arthritis sufferers. It's caused, according to the FDA in America, 60,000 deaths. Imagine it, 60,000 deaths. How many bad reactions did the MHRA have here in this country? About 6. We would still be using it if the FDA hadn't discovered that death was a side effect to taking this drug. It was taken by millions. We also have a fine in America against GlaxoSmithKline of, hard to believe, $3.5 billion. $3.5 billion for what? What they did, they suppressed the evidence of the trials they had. They carried out trials. They didn't publish any of the negative results, only the ones that were neutral or were favourable. And so drugs were getting onto the market that were killing people. And this is a British company. What did the MHRA do in this country? Nothing. I wrote to them and said, for goodness sake, you've got to act against GlaxoSmithKline. And it's no coincidence that the person who chaired the regulatory body for more than a decade was a previous employer of that company, GlaxoSmithKline. Now, I'm not saying that in this instance they did nothing in the regulatory body. They did produce the tools, the advice given out, but it clearly hasn't worked. If it couldn't possibly have worked if 68% of the women still taking it didn't know. I think we must look, and it applies to all governments, it's been raised many times before, that what we need is a regulatory body that's not paid for by the pharmaceutical industry, not controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, but is controlled nationally as independent. They changed this in Italy some years ago. The pharmaceutical industry still pay for running the body, but each government for the last 20 years have said they weren't going to have a fully independent body because they didn't want to pay the money for it. It was fine if the burden was paid by the pharmaceutical industry themselves. And I think I don't want to say that we're all against the pharmaceutical industry. They produce miraculous results this century. Valproate is a very good drug, and everyone I've spoken to who's used it says that it's very effective, that it does reduce the number of seizures, of epileptic fits, the instances of bipolar disorders that it's taken for. So it is a very, very, we don't want to stop its use at all, and we want to appreciate its quality. But clearly, after these 4 years, when the evidence has been there, the vivid, heartbreaking evidence from the parents who've suffered in this way, but still nothing has worked. And we must look to both reforming our regulatory system, appreciating the value of the drug, but certainly giving the least that we can do is getting a fund which can express the sorrow of the country, of regret and repentance that we haven't sorted this matter out, that we haven't given warnings to possible future parents now, and to make sure that the reforms suggested by the Honourable Member for North Norfolk are proceeded with, and we should be doing it as a matter of great urgency.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's finished. Members Davis.